Hello guys, and welcome back. In case you're new here, my name is Hannah, and in today's video I want to talk about a topic that I think is still so underrated, and that is stress and cortisol, aka the stress hormone, and their effects on our whole system, on our body and our mind, our emotions, our behavior, everything basically. And because I learned so much about stress and cortisol within the last year-ish that I wish I knew sooner, I'm making this video to help you prevent these struggles with cortisol, or to help you balance it out if you're already past that point and feel like your system is out of balance. So in this video, I will first talk about what cortisol even is, then about the symptoms of too much cortisol, as well as the symptoms of too low cortisol levels, how I noticed that my cortisol was out of balance, and most importantly, what you can do to balance your cortisol levels and to handle stress a lot better. So the first thing I want to make clear is that cortisol is not always bad. On the contrast, we need cortisol to survive, basically. So a healthy body produces a healthy amount of cortisol in the early morning hours, which makes our body wake up a couple of hours after that. And without that cortisol spike, we would just not get up. And also, cortisol is very anti-inflammatory, which is also why if you have an inflammation in your body, your doctor might very likely give you some sort of cortisone, I think is the medical term for it, which is basically a fake of our natural cortisol. But as with most hormones, cortisol needs to be balanced. So we should not have too much of it and not too little. So how do you know if you have too much cortisol? Well, there are a lot of symptoms, but some of the most common ones, and also the ones that I experienced in the past, are, for example, a so-called moon face, aka a very round face. As an example, here is my face when I was taking cortisol as a medicine, cortisone, and here's my face a couple of months before that. I don't know if you see a difference, but I do see a big difference. Although it can be a lot worse than this. There's even a syndrome called Cushing syndrome, where your face is really swollen. Next to that, high cortisol levels can lead to weight gain because our body just saves up more water, but also more fat. And also not everybody, but most people experience an increased appetite, which was also the case for me. For me, when I was taking the medicine, I could not stop eating, literally. But not only when I was taking the medicine, also after that, when I was experiencing high cortisol levels because of stress. Still to this day, I notice when I'm stressed, I just eat a lot more and a lot more unhealthy things. Then something else that I experience, and that is also very common, is heart racing, especially in the evening and at night. Not only, but especially, which also leads to sleep troubles, which is also a very, very common symptom of too much cortisol, because typically our body produces cortisol in the morning, and then the cortisol level goes down during the day so that it is at its lowest in the evening in order for us to be tired. But when your cortisol levels are out of balance, you tend to not have enough cortisol in the morning, which means that you will have struggles getting out of bed, but instead the cortisol is spiking later in the day, especially in the evening, which keeps you from falling asleep, even though you're sleep deprived and only want to fall asleep. And there are more emotional symptoms of it, like irritability, impatience, sometimes depressive symptoms, or in general, mood swings and just emotions out of balance. Other symptoms include, especially for us women, irregular periods or no periods at all, acne, excess body hair, or loss of hair on the head. But you can also have low cortisol levels. Just as with high cortisol levels, but especially with low cortisol levels, if you think that you might have a problem with your cortisol levels, get it checked out by a doctor, because yes, stress can be the simple reason behind this, but there can also be bigger problems behind that, like a tumor or something like that. I don't want to freak you out. I just want you to be careful and always consult a doctor when in doubt. But in general, symptoms of lower cortisol levels is a lack of energy, dizziness when you get up, a lack of appetite, basically the opposite of most of the symptoms of too high cortisol levels. So what is my experience with cortisol? Well, I had to take the medicine because I had a inflammation in my knee, which gave me these symptoms times 10 compared to the symptoms that I had after taking that medicine months after that, because I was stressed out way too much. So the medicine part probably does not affect most of you. For me, I know now that if possible at all, I will never take cortisol medicine again, if I can avoid it, because it screwed up my whole system. But even after that, I disbalanced my cortisol levels again because I was working a lot and I had some other life difficulties about which I talk in my other videos, in some of my other videos. I'll try to not get too private and on the internet, but I do talk about it, especially about my experience with burnout. And one symptom of burnout typically is stress. And with stress, cortisol is basically a package deal. And that's why the symptoms I talked about earlier were the symptoms that I had, but it's gotten a lot better. And I would honestly say I have weeks where I feel totally back to normal again. I think my strategy is very efficient, and not only because I came up with it. I read a lot of science about cortisol and stress, and keep listening to podcasts and learning about how to balance cortisol levels as well as how to stress myself out less. So next to trying to remove the stressors from your life, especially if it's something obvious like small annoyances during the day or a job you hate, if you can get rid of that, let's talk about the smaller everyday things that you can change. The number one remedy for so many things, struggles, whether it's mental or physical, is to sleep more. Especially women tend to sleep too little because, the studies about the perfect sleep length tell you that you need about 8 hours of sleep were mainly done with men. And nowadays, studies are coming up which show that women tend to need, on average, more than men. In general, especially if you're going through a stressful phase. So first, sleep more. Second, sleep better. And one thing, the best thing, or the easiest thing that you can do to do this is to work with your circadian rhythm, not against it. Meaning, try to go to bed earlier and sleep as long as you need. And what helps with that, to get yourself to go to bed earlier, especially if you have cortisol spikes at night, is to go outside in the morning and to get as much sunlight as possible for at least 10 minutes, if not 20 or 30 minutes in the morning, and to get less light in the evening to help your body realize that in the morning it's time to be awake and in the evening it's time to get sleepy. Another thing that I was not aware of is that as good as exercise usually is for our health, too much of it is not good, especially if you're going through a stressful phase. But even if your mental load is totally fine, you can stress out your body too much if you exercise too much and too hard. For example, if you like to do high intensity interval training, or in general, for example, weightlifting, which I am still a big fan of, and I think weightlifting or strength training in general is very, very important and helpful for overall mental and physical health. Doing too much of it can lead to your cortisol levels being out of balance. Because when we work out, when we put stress, physical stress on our body produces cortisol, which is not necessarily bad if it's not too much. And that's why, especially if you already have symptoms of too high cortisol levels, it helps to switch to lower impact workouts for a while at least. And that's, I think, also one reason why lately, or within the last couple of months or few years, Pilates has become so popular, especially among women, because it helps to not stress ourselves out as much, both physically and mentally. And if you don't like Pilates or yoga, you can still do strength training, for example, in the gym, but just go a bit slower, and especially maybe try to not do the high intensity interval training and maybe switch to more softer cardio like cycling or jogging, or even better, walking. Walking is one of the best exercises you can do for your mental and physical health, especially when it comes to cortisol regulation. Another thing that helps is to not work out on an empty stomach. So I used to have my perfect morning routine figured out. It was working for me. I got up, I meditated, I worked out, I got ready, and I started my day. And that did work out for a while until my stress levels were just too high, and working out on an empty stomach means even more stress on your body than on a non-empty stomach. And that's why now I switched up my morning routine and I do not work out in the mornings anymore. For now, I work out in the evenings, in the early evenings to be clear, because too late in the evening you should, I think, not work out, because that makes you awake and doesn't calm your body down, because your body feels like, okay, now it's action time and not calming down time. And that is especially the case if you do intermittent fasting, which in general is also a very good thing. And I've been doing it for years and I love it. And science says it's good, but only, again, if you don't overdo it. Especially for us women, especially for people in stressful phases, fasting is also a form, or can be a form, of stress on your body. So if your body does not get food for too long of an amount of time, cortisol is released, more cortisol than already is being released. And that means it helps to reduce your fasting window by a couple of hours, depending on what kind of intermittent fasting you do. I only used to do like 14 hours, but even that can be too long, especially if you work out in the morning on your empty stomach. So what I did to still keep my autophagy, which is one of the main advantages of intermittent fasting, going, I try to only have a fasting window of 2 or maybe 13 hours tops, and then I try to eat something. And in the beginning, I also started snacking during the day, because also during the day, if you don't eat for too many hours, your body gets very hungry, and these feelings of hunger is a form of stress, which again means that your cortisol levels might rise. And snacking is something I usually don't recommend as a nutrition health nerd, because science shows that spiking our blood sugar levels up all the time is usually not the best idea. But if we have problems with the cortisol, it helps to not get too hungry. Another thing I changed, which was kind of hard for me, is swapping coffee for matcha, because coffee is not necessarily bad. I want to make this very clear. Coffee can be very good for you if you don't overdo it, but if you have troubles with your cortisol levels, drinking coffee tends to increase your cortisol levels even more. While matcha, even though matcha obviously also contains caffeine, has cortisol balancing treats to it. And if you love coffee like me, if you don't want to totally avoid coffee, you can switch to caffeine-free coffee, or at least don't drink coffee on an empty stomach, which is something you should never do if you care about your hormone health and stuff. But especially if you struggle with cortisol, try to leave coffee out if possible overall, or if you need your coffee, have it after a meal and not too late in the day. Something else I've always kind of been doing but have been focusing on even more is meditation. I know this is probably not a surprise tip here, because you've probably heard that meditation is good to calm your mind down, and it really, 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 really is. So I started to focus back on my meditation practice, maybe not every day because I don't want to stress myself out, but I try to do it as often as possible, and I feel a big effect on my mind, my body, and my ability to handle stressful thoughts, which you basically practice when you practice meditation. Something else that helped me a lot is to just make room for my mind to digest things, because in today's world we are so used to always doing something and or being bombarded with some sort of information or just impressions of any kind, whether that's people or content or even just a podcast. External impressions keep our mind busy, and that way our mind, especially in stressful phases when our mind needs time and energy to digest things, it takes up mind energy. And that's why I started to, for example, when I take a walk, kind of make it more meditative by not listening to a podcast. I sometimes just try to do nothing, to have nothing in my ears, nothing exciting going into my eyes, and just be, whether I was walking or maybe sometimes I was just laying on my bed, just chilling, just letting my thoughts flow. Another thing that helps so much is a bit obvious, but still I want to mention it, is to talk about it. Whether you talk to a person or to your journal, it does not matter. Just get your thoughts and your feelings into words and out. Because once your struggles, or not even struggles, but your thoughts are out on paper or in the world, they feel a lot less heavy. And if you're going through a really difficult phase, or even if not, something I always recommend is going to professional therapy. Even if you have friends and family that you can talk to, a professional is professional and can help you in a very different way than your friends and family can. Another thing you can do is take supplements of any form, whether that's herbs in the form of tea, for example. There are a lot of calming herbs and teas that you can drink or eat, but also there are supplements like ashwagandha, ginseng, rosea, I think is how you pronounce it, I put it on the screen, that help our body to, as the name suggests, adapt to situations, in this case stressful situations. And in general, this is not new, I know, but eating healthy also helps your body balance out hormone levels a lot. So you don't want to stress yourself out by trying to eat too healthy and then, being stressed out because you cheated and didn't manage to get all your vitamins in and your proteins in and whatever. Don't stress yourself out, but try to provide your body with the vitamins and nutrients that it needs. While these techniques help me so much to recover and to not get back to total 100% normal, but to get a lot better, the best thing you can do, of course, is to remove the stressors from your life, if that's possible at all. And if that stressor is your work, especially if you're trying to start a business or are very ambitious and are hustling all the time, check out this video right here where I talk about habits that I adopted to be productive without burning myself out. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. I wish you all the best. Take care of yourself, and I see you in my next video.